and welcome back to The Rundown. My name is Carla De La Paz.
And my name's Katerina Kateska. Coming up in this week's episode, we head out and talk to the students of La Trobe about election week. We talk everything and anything Bachelor related.
And Caelim's back with another movie review. This week we take a look at the movie Our Kind of Traitor. Then later we're joined by Mitch and Caelim for the latest in sports, and we have special guest ESPN reporter Matt Walsh to discuss everything AFL prelims, the Brownlow Medal and the NFL.
But before we head into those stories, let's have a look at the latest news headlines. The number of Australians who have opted out of My Health record since July 16 has been revealed. Australian Digital Health Agency head Tim Kelsey told the Senate inquiry into the medical database system on Monday evening that as of September 12, the opt-out rate was about 3%, roughly 900,000 people. He warned the estimate was not comprehensive and reflected only opt-outs via the website or call centres, as paper form has not yet been reconciled. The opt-out period, which was extended after concerns for the medical community, ends on November 15th. Every Australian with a Medicare card will automatically be given a record unless they tell the agency they do not want one by the deadline. After the hearing, Labor Health spokeswoman Catherine King said in a statement that the program's rollout so far was botched and called for it to be suspended. My Health record has been criticised by a variety of health and privacy advocacy groups during the opt-out period, promoting speculation about how many Australians would actively choose not to have one. Mr. Kelsey also said about 181,000 people have signed up since the beginning of the opt-out period. Around 6.1 million Australians currently have a My Health record, which exists as an opt-in system from 2012 until this year. Concerns about My Health record raised before the Senate inquiry have focused on patient privacy, the system's security design, and access by third parties such as law enforcement. My Health grants users a number of privacy controls over their medical records, but they are not in place by default. Australia's residential property has lost a combined $13 billion in value in the 3 months to July, according to the Australian Bureau of Statistics. The ABS Residential Property Price Index across the 8 major cities fell 0.7% over the June quarter, to be down 0.6% over 12 months. In its first annual fall since the June quarter in 2012, ABS Chief Economist Bruce Hockman said Australia's two largest cities continued to lead the fall. Sydney recorded its fourth consecutive quarter of falling property prices, while Melbourne was down for the second consecutive quarter. The initial slowdown in these markets was spurred by regulatory changes and a tightening in the supply of credit to investors, Mr. Hockman said. A drop in investors demanded over recent months appear to be adding to the slowing in house credit growth. The effect of this is more pronounced in the large property markets of Sydney and Melbourne, with the exception of Hobart. Most capital cities have continued to record a moderation in annual growth rates since September quarter 2017. Apartment prices are on a slightly weaker footing compared to the detached dwelling, as they have done for some time, owing to widespread issues of oversupply in the major eastern capitals of Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane. In world news, Japanese billionaire Yusaku Maezawa will be the first private passenger on a solo SpaceX rocket trip around the moon. The SpaceX Big Falcon rocket is scheduled to make its trip in 2023. Company founder Elon Musk announced at an event in the SpaceX headquarters near Los Angeles. Mr. Maezawa, the 42-year-old founder of clothes retail Zozo, said it has been a lifelong dream to go into space, that just thinking about the journey got his heart racing. He said he would invite 6 to 8 architects, designers and other creative people on the week-long journey in 2023. The BFI is still in development and will make several unmanned test launches before it takes on passengers. The reusable 118-metre rocket will have its own dedicated passenger ship, but the mission will not involve a lunar landing. The average distance from Earth to the Moon is about 382,500 kilometres. Mr. Musk said the entrepreneur, founder of Japan's largest retail website and one of the country's richest people, would have paid a lot of money for the trip, but declined to disclose the exact amount. Mr. Maezawa came to SpaceX with the idea for the flight, Mr. Musk said.
According to ABC Net, the company Coca-Cola is closely watching the growing use of cannabis elements in drinks, another sign the controversial product is getting more acceptance in mainstream culture. The statement came after reports the beverage giant was in talks with a Canadian cannabis company to create a health drink infused with cannabidiol, a naturally occurring non-psychoactive compound derived from the cannabis plant. Shares of the company Aurora Cannabis Inc. closed up nearly 17% of the Toronto Stock Exchange after the report. Spokesperson for companies declined to comment on the report, but acknowledged their interest in that segment of the cannabis market. It is believed by many to have anti-inflammation and pain-relieving properties, and numerous CBD-infused products have emerged recently. Aurora spokeswoman Heather McGregor said her company has expressed specific interest in the infused beverage space, and we intend to enter that market. Coke spokesperson Kent Landers said the beverage giant had made no such decision. Coca-Cola quite famously used to contain cocaine. Exactly how much is the topic of much contention via its coca leaf extract, but has been cocaine-free since 1929. A prison sentence for assaulting a paramedic may become mandatory in Victoria after 2 women were spared jail time despite assaulting paramedics earlier this year. Premier Daniel Andrews recently introduced a bill that could see anyone who physically assaults an emergency service worker spend mandatory time behind bars on his final session of Parliament before the November election. The legislation could narrow the scope of special consideration of an offender's circumstances, according to the ABC, and it's understood that it is currently the #1 priority for the Andrews government, ahead of an election where issues of law and order are expected to be the biggest talking points. The Greens Party have also chimed in during the final stretch before elections, proposing a gambling tax on online bookmakers. The Victorian Greens, who hold the balance of power after the election, want the state to have a 15% tax rate. Greens leader Samantha Ratnam told ABC the tax had to be a priority. Over the border in South Australia, we saw another Labor government set the bar in Australia with 15% gambling tax. But here in Victoria, we've lumped with a government that refuses to take any meaningful steps to put people ahead of gambling profits. So I can definitely see the reason why the Daniels government would want to introduce prison sentences for people who assault emergency service workers.
Yeah, it's been a very constant thing, and I'm surprised it hasn't happened till now.
Yeah, and it's when I was thinking before that in particular when it's with an ambulance, it's their job to keep you safe and alive and well. So it just seems the last thing people should be doing is assaulting them.
Yeah, because the people you call to keep you safe are those people, and if you're assaulting them, they're not going to feel safe going to work. And if Daniel Andrews can do this before elections, that'd be amazing.
Well, funny that you say elections, because speaking of elections, here at La Trobe University, we are currently having elections of our own. If you've been in and around the Agora and you've probably been handed some flyers, maybe saw some posters hanging around campus, and that's because voting for the 2019 LTSU Student Council is currently taking place until Friday this week. Now, this is a touchy topic because some people are not fond of the election period and will probably spend the entire week trying to find different ways in which they can avoid the Agora. So I figured I would go out this week, get a feel of how students are feeling about elections, and I had a pretty fun time, so let's check it out.
Trobe Fresh Air. Thanks, intern. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Carla de la Paz. You've probably seen me on a variety of shows such as The Rundown. It's the only show I've been on so far, so that's pointless to say. Anyway, so it's student elections this week, and I figured it would be a good idea to go speak to some students on what they feel about election time. Are they going to vote? Are they not going to vote? What they agree and disagree with. So, let's check it out. Let's see what they have to say. Thanks, intern. Thank you. It's 2 sugars. I said 2 sugars. Thanks. We have the lovely Rachel Simmons here with me today. Clearly someone has come into the Agora ready to vote. Have you voted?
I have. I have because of a friend, not because I wanted to.
I have not.
Do you plan on voting, or are you just going to not vote at all?
I'm just going to not vote at all.
Yes, I actually have just now. It's a great experience.
Fantastic.
What I really like is Stand Up, the party that's running right now. They're actually one of my top selections.
I don't really care, so I just don't pay attention.
So were there any policies that you might have seen or you heard of that you kind of thought were really cool and you agreed with, or maybe ones that you didn't agree with very much?
Didn't pay enough attention.
Okay, so I'm sensing a theme that a lot of people didn't really pay much attention to the student elections. If you could tell people how they could avoid getting bombarded by student elections this week, what would you suggest?
I absolutely hate election week, so I've dressed up as a La Trobe staff member using my open day gear so people don't approach me. If you don't have access to, the good kit from open day, I'd probably recommend doing what my friend does and just tell them you vote for Pauline Hanson and they tend to leave you alone.
Callum doesn't really care, so this is the end of the interview. Thanks for joining. I don't know what else to do.
It's great to be here.
Not again! Hey guys, so it's day 2 of student elections and here I am again hoping for a successful turnout this time around because yesterday was not that great. I think the number one question is, have you voted?
No, I haven't, and I probably won't.
No.
Why not?
I'm a third year and I'm graduating very soon and I don't see the point.
Looking around uni, there's been a lot of flyers and posters. Have there been any policies that you've seen that you really agree with or disagree with?
I think Doggo Mondays sounds good to me. Also, make Rabelais great again.
What tips can you give to people that are coming into the Agora and want to avoid all of these lovely people promoting the election?
Well, coming off the bus, walking to the Agora, I had a lot of time to think about this. My main tip for me, because I'm a bigger guy, if I just look like I'm in kind of a bad mood, they stay away.
The best thing I've ever done is I don't stay cognito. I just put on my best bitch face, and if anyone comes up to me, I say that I will kill them in their sleep.
So that's what we've heard from the La Trobe students. Some people are really opinionated, some people aren't. But I think the most aggressive La Trobians are not actually the students, but the ducks. So I figured I should ask them about student elections as well. So let's go. Let's find out what they have to say. Quack, quack. That is an accurate representation of what the students are like in the Agora. Hey. They say that if you act like the duck, they won't actually know that I'm not a duck. Quack.
That was a very relatable package.
Thank
I
you.
can relate so much because I ignore the Agora at all costs this week.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with you. Most years I would ignore the Agora. I would do everything that I could to avoid this whole area. I would go up the stairs. I would find new areas of the uni just to avoid everyone. But luckily for me this year, I have so many friends in campaigning at the moment. So because I'm an amazing friend, I thought that it would be good to show them some support. So I did go out and vote this week.
Well,
and I've got
I haven't voted. I keep telling them I have, but I'm not because they're really pushy.
Oh, no. But I can definitely understand.
I think most people get that when they're pushy on you, you don't want to vote.
Yeah.
And yeah.
But election time is a really dramatic time here at La Trobe University. And once again, speaking of dramatic times, I think Katerina is going to go into our little Bachelor segment, which I'm really excited to talk about.
Well, if you've been keeping up with reality TV, then for the past 5 weeks you've seen and heard everything Bachelor related you haven't needed to be watching. This year has been a roller coaster of a series with an unlikely and very Aussie bloke taking the mantle of Bachelor for 2018 and taking the risk at finding the one. Nick Cummins, or the Honey Badger as he's known, is this year's Bachelor. You may recognise him as the former Wallabies winger or as Australian underwear model. But no matter whether you watch the show or not, this year's season of The Bachelor has had everyone talking. Now, the Honey Badger, as he's known, is a really interesting dude. If you've watched The Bachelor, not even if you follow The Bachelor on Twitter, he has some really interesting ways of describing things.
He really does.
He uses his own version of metaphors, if I can say.
Yeah, and sometimes, most of the time, I don't actually know what he's talking about. And I have a few of the analogies because I love the analogies that he uses because ever since I've watched the show, I think I've used it's going off like a raw prawn. It's one of my favourites. It's like a bag of cats at the Greyhound meet. I use that one so much at home. I think they're so funny because it's so Australian. I feel like you can't get any more ochre.
Yeah, there's a really interesting one about Tim Tams. It's on our Twitter page if you want to have a look.
It's on the Twitter
There's
page.
another one called I'm sweating like a gypsy with a mortgage. Which,
I don't know what he's going on about, but I've got some of the famous sayings that the badge says on the show and just around on social media. So I figured I would test you to see whether you can actually understand what he's trying to say with these phrases.
I might not be too good at that.
Do you want to give it a go?
Let's go.
Okay. So the first one that I've got, my personal favourite, is "You're as tough as a woodpecker's lips." What do you think he's trying to say about
you're
that?
like very strong, or like
I would think so. I think he's
physically and emotionally maybe strong because woodpecker's lips. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Or maybe he's like, you've got it. You're really probably strong or really level-headed. I'm on the same
not too
boat.
sure. Sometimes there's also just like the kid that fell out of the tree. He just wasn't in it.
Yeah, well,
I don't know what that means.
that's quite literal when he says just the kid that fell out of the tree. He just wasn't in it. Of course, the kid's not in the tree anymore. Nick, what are you
On
talking
Twitter,
about?
Todd Sampson, if everyone knows what he did, he wrote, "Fair dinkum, I've learned more about metaphors, analogies, and linguistic flexibility from Nick the Honey Badger than from university." Because he just uses them every 2 seconds.
He does.
It's very interesting.
He does. And on the topic of The Bachelor, look, I have sort of like a love-hate relationship with The Bachelor. 7:30 will come around on a Wednesday, Thursday night. You can bet your bottom dollar that I'll be in the lounge having a ball, watching all the drama ensue. However, I must admit that this year was actually really, really hard for me to watch, and I'm going to pin that blame on the villains of this year. So they were Kat, Romy, and Alicia.
Yes.
I honestly couldn't stand them. The nastiness that emitted from those girls.
Anyone in Australia could.
No, I was so close to just turning off the TV and never watching the show again because of them. So when Nick gave them the flick, that rhymed, I was on cloud nine. What did you think of them, Katarina?
I think I haven't watched any episode, which proves how popular The Bachelor is because I know everything that's happened.
That's amazing.
I know.
And just through social media.
Yeah. The producers let that go on for way too long.
They did.
There was a comment on Twitter by New York Wonder Rabbit. "Those two mean girls, Romy and Kat, should be removed from the show." And then Katie the leader said, "If my daughter went on The Bachelor and acted like Romy, I'd be so disgusted and disappointed."
Yeah.
And then after they were forced to leave the show, they went on radio shows and said it wasn't as bad it seemed. I think maybe a lot of it was smart editing.
It could have been smart editing, but
it doesn't excuse what they said.
It doesn't excuse the behaviour, and I kind of found that the fact that they kept them on there for so long, it was kind of like they were enabling that bullying behaviour, and that's the last thing that TV should be emitting out into the public because you've got young people that are watching that, and they're going to think that it's okay.
It's not a good example
to act that way.
They let that go on for way too long.
That's true. But on the topic of entertainment, Calum is back with his 2-minute movie reviews. This week we are looking at Our Kind of Traitor, based on the novel written by Jean Le Carre. That's my attempt at doing a French accent. But yeah, let's find out and see what Calum thought of this film. So let's check it out.
Hello everyone and welcome to week 3 of the 2-minute movie reviews here on Latrobe Live. Today we'll be looking at a movie that came out a couple of years ago, but it's a movie that I only saw recently, and after doing a little bit of research I found out that it didn't get a wide release. So it's a smaller budget movie, it's an independent movie, but it stars a couple of big names, and that movie is Our Kind of Traitor. It's got Ewan McGregor, Naomi Harris, Stellan Skarsgård, and also Damian Lewis, who was red hot after his turn as Nick Brody in Homeland. The plot is basically Ewan McGregor and his wife in Naomi Harris. They are on holiday in Marrakech, where they meet up with a high-up member of the Russian mafia in Dima, who is played by Skarsgård, and he's absolutely stunning as this character. He's amazing, and he disappears into him completely. I know him mostly from his work in the Thor movies as Erik Selvig, but he completely disappears into this character, Dima, and he's by far the best part of this movie. Dima gives Perry a USB stick which contains financial information, bank accounts for high-up members of the Russian mafia, and he enlists Perry's help to get that to MI6 when he returns to London, because he believes that his children are in danger. I thought it was a very basic plot, something that we maybe have seen before, but maybe not in this style. I really like this movie. I think it was a bit slow in parts. That's probably the one main issue I'd have with it. The pacing was often off. It would move into a really, intense action scene, and then it would slowly drift back into a scene where Dima and Perry are talking together, and that's probably the one issue I've got with it. I was often looking and then just relaxing, looking and relaxing. So with this movie not actually being in cinemas, obviously it came out a few years ago now, I really don't know whether to recommend this to you or not. While obviously you could rent it online somewhere or you could buy a physical copy of some sort, but it really is your decision. If this is your sort of movie, like a spy genre sort of movie, then go for it. But then again, you're not going to get a James Bond movie. It really is your decision, and I'll leave it up to you guys. So can't wait to discuss it with you guys back in the studio.
That was really cool to hear what Caleb had to say about the film. I heard that Ewan McGregor was in this, and I'm a huge fan of him. So
He is amazing, isn't he?
I'll probably give it a watch because I love him as Obi-Wan.
Yeah.
He's always, forever, and will be in Moulin Rouge. But on the topic of Ewan McGregor, I'm pretty sure he's coming out with a new film this year called Christopher Robin in the next couple of weeks, which a little birdie told me that Caleb will soon be reviewing that film. So let's keep an eye out for that.
That should be very interesting, yes. Keep an eye out for Callum's movie reviews over the coming weeks, but we're going to take a short break, and when we come back, you will be joined by our very own sport reporters, Mitch and Callum, and with our special guest reporter from ESPN, Matt Walsh. We'll be right back.
And welcome back to the sports segment for this week. We are joined live on Skype by ESPN reporter Matt Walsh. G'day, Matt. How are you going?
Matt, can you hear us, mate?
Can you hear us?
I can, yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we've got you now. Beautiful.
Wonderful.
So it's been a big week in sport, hasn't it? Not just in Australia, but also across the globe. We will start here in Australia. It's been the semi-final weekend's just gone. We've seen Collingwood and Richmond make their way into the preliminary finals. Obviously, Richmond played a couple of weeks ago now, but obviously we've also got Melbourne, a big story coming through from the elimination finals, now play West Coast over there for a spot in their first grand final in 18 years. And it really is just a great time to be a football fan as ever in September.
Just a great time to be in Melbourne or in Australia as well. I think the place sort of comes alive basically when September rolls around. It's just a great place to be. Like you said, we've now got our preliminary finalists. I think Richmond probably still the standout team for this year, but I dare say that they're probably really happy that Melbourne is on the other side of the draw at this stage. They'd much prefer Melbourne to head over west, I think, to play the West Coast Eagles. Look, Richmond, probably from what they saw on the weekend, they probably won't be troubled too much by Collingwood, I feel. I still think they're the standout team in the competition. Collingwood's a great story, and their win on the weekend was excellent, and the conditions probably did suit them a fair bit better. But look, Richmond is probably the benchmark in that game. The one thing I do worry about is how Dustin Martin's going to pull up, because I don't know if you've been following, but he has been training away from the main group throughout the week. It's been revealed that it's a corky that's slowing him down. They thought about draining his knee draining fluid from his knee rather, which is never a good thing when you've got a preliminary final coming up in just a few days' time. So the question is not whether he will play, because Richmond said he will play. The question, I think, especially for Collingwood, is who goes to him. Is it Levi Greenwood? But if he's injured, does he stay more forward, being Dusty? So maybe you look at someone like Brayden Maynard, who had such a great week last week on Toby Green. Just close checked him, was real physical, kept him to 9 touches and not a score. So maybe that's the way that Collingwood decides to go. So, I mean, look, Richmond at the moment probably still the number 1 seed and should be the favourite to win the grand final. They'll be a little bit worried about the Dusty situation, but overall I think they're pretty well balanced as a team and should get the job done there to get through to the grand final. The other prelim's probably the one that, I don't know, it's probably more of a coin toss. I can kind of see it going two ways. I don't know about you guys, but I either think that West Coast will win by about a kick, or Melbourne might do what they've done the last couple of weeks and kick away to a 20 sort of point victory. I don't know what you guys think, if that's the way you're thinking.
Yeah, well, you do talk about that Saturday night fixture, Matt, and obviously the last 2 times the D's have gone over to Perth, they have got the 4 points against the Eagles. Obviously that one with Tom McDonald kicking the winning goal with just a minute to go. But we do, obviously, when you talk about Dusty Martin, when you talk about probably the versatility that he brings to his game, and obviously if he is injured, he can play forward. And you talk about that Maynard matchup, like you said, fantastic on the weekend. So a big weekend of footy. We could probably expect 100,000 potentially on Friday night and packed out Optus Stadium on Saturday. So it is going to be a ripping week of finals. Now, obviously, after every round of prelims, we do have the Brownlow medal on Monday night. How are you seeing that night pan out?
Well, my colleague Jake Michaels at ESPN is a massive Tom Mitchell fan and has been very closely looking at the Brownlow predictor and analysing games throughout the year. And he thinks that no one is really going to catch Tom Mitchell. I think last year and the year before, he's still a young kid. You've got to remember, I think he's 24 or 23 years old. So it does take a couple of years for these guys to get under the nose of the umpires. And if Mitchell, who tends to be the bloke on the bottom of the pack doing the heavy sort of work, feeds around the stoppages and he's the last bloke up, each time handing the ball to the ump at the ball ups, you suspect that he's now very much in the line of sight of the umpires. And he has a great theory, and I love this. I'll share this with you, is that he thinks that the players that get votes are those that are interviewed on the ground by the TV crews post-match. And he counted 16 or 17 times, I think it was, that Tom Mitchell was interviewed on the ground after the game. So he's pretty confident that he'll be a bit of a runaway. Not too sure how someone like Andrew Gaff goes when he's suspended for the last 4 games. I'm not too sure. Nat Fyfe had a good year, but he won't challenge Mitchell either. Patrick Cripps in a wooden spoon winning team was excellent, and I suspect that he will poll pretty well in games that Carlton has lost, which is, it's a rarity, but it's not. It wouldn't be groundbreaking if he made the top 3. I think top 5 is probably a good shout, but it wouldn't be groundbreaking if he made the top 3 either. So, look, it's Tom Mitchell's to lose at this stage, but yeah, it's the top 3. You probably kind of have to sort of toss the coin about.
And you mentioned a lot of candidates there for possible Brownlow Smokies, and obviously your favourite in Tom Mitchell. I think it's everybody's favourite, and that's safe to say. But could you possibly see a dark horse such as a Max Gawn, who's had an incredible season for Melbourne, obviously the All-Australian ruckman? Could you see him perhaps be one of the first people in many years who is in a midfielder, perhaps break out and maybe come over everybody else? It's a possibility, in my opinion. I don't think I could see him winning. I think that it would be either Mitchell or Dusty. But could you see Gawny perhaps taking home Charlie?
Look, the greatest thing that happened to ruckman was the change of that third man up rule, where the value of ruckman was really sort of brought back into the game. And if you look back at Melbourne's season, and Collingwood to a lesser extent, or probably the same extent actually with Brodie Grundy, is that they have influenced the game a lot more than ruckman have in recent years. Whether it's enough to get votes in what is definitely a midfielder's award, I'm not too sure. I think Gawn had an excellent season. Top 5's not out of the question by far, but it would be pretty hard for a big bloke to win it, I think.
Well, it's certainly been a big week in the AFL. We will quickly move over to the NFL now. There was a match on the weekend which, as a Packers fan, I couldn't help but watch, and we managed to give up a 13-point lead at the end of the third term, and it went to overtime, which we thankfully came out of unscathed. And after coming from behind to beat the Bears, it was almost a sense of deja vu, but on the other side of the field to see Green Bay lose their lead and almost give up the game.
Well, Green Bay could be 0-2 at the moment, which is the crazy part about it. I've got Aaron Rodgers as my fantasy quarterback, so I've been following him somewhat closely as well. And I went through the full spectrum of emotions when he went down early in that game against the Bears. Looked like he'd done his ACL, was carted off, came back as he's done many times. I'm a Cowboys fan. I watched him come back and beat the Cowboys in a playoff game on one leg. So I've seen him do that before. But you're right. A couple of things go either way. Rodgers, stays off for a couple of extra series in the Bears game. The Bears maybe hold on. If things go the other way on the weekend, maybe Minnesota wins and Green Bay 0-2. So I think they're pretty lucky to get away from that 1-1 tie, which is crazy to sort of say as well.
Yeah, well, we did talk about the first 2 weeks so far. Has been an exciting NFL season. Obviously, my Rams flying high 2-0. Obviously, all the off-season moves they made was certainly going to put a lot of expectations on them. But obviously, off the field, Ryan Fitzpatrick putting the Fitz magic into the press conference, and same with Patrick Mahomes putting in fantastic efforts. It has been an exciting season so far. Would you agree?
Absolutely. I think the Rams are quite clearly a standout team still. They'll be pretty hard to beat. Pretty much anywhere, I think, which is kind of crazy from where they were a few years ago. The Mahomes story is a great one. I think it was a crazy stat from the weekend that he threw more touchdowns than his team had third downs, which is just unbelievable. I don't know much longer they can keep going. Look, young quarterback, maybe he's sort of riding the high. I'm not convinced by Kansas City yet by any stretch of the imagination. Tampa Bay is a great story, but again, I'm not sort of convinced that Ryan Fitzpatrick, as much as he is a really likeable character, and he kind of takes the safe option, I think, at quarterback a lot. Whether that'll get Tampa Bay very far, although to be fair, I didn't really have them high up the pecking order at the start of the season, so they're probably already exceeding my expectations. When all that sort of locker room stuff with Jameis Winston went down, I sort of wasn't expecting much from that team as a whole. But you're right, it's going to be another cracking season, I think. There are a lot of teams, there's no sort of real standout in the AFC, so I think there's a few spots up for grabs there. I mean, the Patriots lost to the Jags. Are the Jags any good? We're not so sure. It's really early in the season to sort of start speculating on who finishes where, but I think the important point at this point is there's really no team out of it except for maybe Arizona. I don't think they're going to be quite that good. Buffalo don't look that great, but like Seattle's 0-2, but I still don't think they're a 0-3 team. I don't think they can keep going winless. So there's a lot to play out, but look, hold on to your hats because it'll get going really quickly because it's such a short season, and who knows what can happen.
Exactly right, and it could be another crazy season in NFL. So thank you again, Matt Walsh, for joining us here on The Rundown. We look forward to your company, hope maybe one day down the track.
No worries. Thanks, guys, for having me.
No worries, and we'll throw back to Carla and Katerina.
Thanks so much, guys, for joining us. Mitch, Caleb, and of course, Matt Walsh. We'll be back next week for more in sport. That's all for today. Join us next week for more of the latest breaking news, sports, and entertainment. And as always, we say
Goodbye.
Go Richmond.